please end when you are signaled to do so. Following a few rounds of prepared questions, we will address audience questions. You should have received, there's index cards, where you can write your question. Again, questions should be addressed to a district, not a specific candidate. We will continue the same district rotation as in the prepared question format. We reserve the right to group questions if more than one person asks a question on the same topic. If you need more index cards, please raise your hand and we'll come to you. She's our van for the evening. At the conclusion of the question period, the candidates will have 1 minute for a closing statement. We recognize that not all candidates will be able to address every question or every issue. You may wish to use your closing statement to do so. Thank you. So, our opening question, and this is the 2 minutes. You are ready? Okay, great. So we'll start with Frank and work our way down. So please talk about the work you do in your professional and advocacy life that propels you to run for office, and how does your area of expertise contribute to benefit all people in Raleigh? And yes, it's one mic for people.
Hello. So my name is Frank Pierce. I grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, in southeast Raleigh, right next to Seafood. Graduated from Broughton High School, went to Lincoln Middle School. I'm a small business owner of a landscape company. During the pandemic, I went back to school and got my teaching licensure so I could help teach during the pandemic because of such our teacher shortage. I also volunteer with multiple organizations like Wide Ministries, which every week this year so far we're bringing in 10 refugee families, and they go throughout the entire state and country. I work with the North Carolina Foundation for Public School Children. This year alone, we raised over $20,000 for Southeast Raleigh for book bags. We brought 500 book bags to the Helping Hand Mission in Southeast Raleigh. I have built my small business from the ground up, started with $5. It is now a $250,000 a year business. Every one of my employees makes over $20 an hour as a small business owner. What I bring to the table is I know Raleigh. I am in my community. I know what my community needs. I've been working with people in our community for years. During the pandemic, I also worked with multiple organizations to raise over $250,000 to help put over 400 families in hotels that were in transitional homes and had nowhere to go. I also delivered a minimum of 200 different families a week food who did not want to leave. My district has changed a lot. It used to be a minority district. It was 54% minority. Raleigh was one of 15 places in the entire country that had 2 minority districts. And I have been working with the minority community my entire life and plan to keep doing the same as your leader in District B.
Thank you, Frank.
My name is Jacob Lorberblatt. In my professional life, I'm a principal consultant. That wouldn't be uncommon for a lot of Raleigh. A remote tech worker in Raleigh, it's not an uncommon profession. I've lived here for about 11 years. I moved my entire family here. I started out trying to find a rental home. I spent weeks camping at Jordan Lake in an effort to try and find and propel my path here until we got it. And so I've experienced pretty much every level of life in North Raleigh as I eventually purchased my home 4 years ago in District B. And through that cycle, I've seen a wide variety of families and needs, and how it's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody who moves into an area and what may be required. I've also worked with other charity groups such as World Central Kitchens when the last big storm rolled through. The name is escaping me of which storm, but when that rolled through, we provided food to the coast throughout the area, and I've had my entire family, including my younger children, were all given full status on that project for their work. I continue to think of feeding people and helping people as a primary purpose, and have personal feeling for people who are maybe trying to move into an area who have less. And I would like to bring to the table my ability to learn and continue to work on things. As a consultant, I've always had to learn and adjust and hear what people are saying and consider the options carefully. And I would like to bring that same problem-solving aspect to the duties of the City Council. Thank you.
It's on automatically? There you go. All right.
Hi everyone, I'm Patton. I moved to Raleigh 6 years ago. Right before my daughter was born, I just knew I actually moved here on my due date. Don't recommend that part. But I knew that we wanted to put our roots down in Raleigh. We wanted to make Raleigh our home because we knew that Raleigh offered the promise of financial prosperity, community, diversity, parks, and all the rest, like schools, great libraries, and in so many ways Raleigh has delivered on that promise. And in so many ways, if we don't actively and boldly right now, that promise is not true. It's currently not true for all of our neighbors. It's going to slip away from more of our neighbors, and we need to get to work. We need to preserve that promise for our current neighbors, for the ones moving here, and the ones who are going to be here in 7 generations from now. In my personal and professional life, in my advocacy life, I have worked on my school's PTA, and that's where it started. I think that all politics are personal, they're all local, but personal is political, and so I work on the PTA to improve the lives of students and staff at my daughter's school. I work on our neighborhood HOA, volunteer to bring our community together and also make sure that things like our bylaws are really representative of what our neighbors want. And also, I'm a proud member of Moms Demand Action, working hard on the long fight for gun safety in our country. I lost my train of thought of the timer. Sorry about that. But I also have worked professionally across industries. I was a public school teacher, but I also have waited tables, nannied. I most recently worked nights at a factory because childcare is astronomically expensive. As I moved up into management, I worked hard to improve working conditions for my employees by giving them hazard pay during the heat of the pandemic. That's my time.
Hello everyone, thank you WakeUP Wake County first off for having us here for this forum, and also everyone here online or in person today. First off, a little bit about myself. My name is Manu Lee. I'm running for Raleigh City Council District B. I'm a first generation Korean American. I've lived in this district for over 14 years now. I am a college student as well, studying political science at North Carolina State University. I'm in my last semester. I'm also a city employee elected commissioner for the Raleigh Civil Service Commission. And I'm also a substitute teacher for the Wake County Public School System, and also the third vice chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party's AAPI caucus. So, why am I running? I'm running because representation really matters to me. As a young Asian American, I'm proud to say that if I am elected, I would represent a voice that has never been seen before on the council. We need someone who will represent our minority communities as well as the future homeowners and renters of tomorrow. So that's precisely why I'm running today. And if you look at all of my experiences, if you look at all of what I've done throughout my life, I think it sort of shows this sort of dedication to representation and helping my community, and that's exactly what I want to do today. Thank you.
Thank you all for that. The first question I actually want to circle back to recognizing that we have a diverse coalition of partners putting this event together. Over a dozen logos you'll see on the sign here behind me, as well as at the entrance. And so forgive me for earlier not mentioning it was more than just Wake Up that brought it together. So thank you, and there's some materials over at these tables. So related to that, District B is a very diverse set of communities. How do you plan to make sure the voices that make up the non-white population of the district are heard at the council table? And we will start at the news end and go back this way this time. That's 1 minute.
So, I strongly believe that the voices of our minority communities are important and must be heard during the decision-making processes. The way we go about, bringing them to the table is by improving our community engagement plan. I think what we need to do is work towards a system that reaches out to our community members. Go door knocking every time there's a rezoning request in their neighborhoods, and inform them of, hey, here's what's happening in your district. Here's what's happening in your neighborhood. come out to these community events and learn all about it and voice your opinions. And I think that's exactly what we need to move forward, but also it's about educating our communities about these issues. I mean, I'm strongly in favor of going out into our schools and teaching our youth that it's important to follow along with city council latest happenings and whatnot, and show the importance of being involved in local politics. So.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's a lot of ways that we can access all of our neighbors, regardless of their demographic. We need to view that as incumbent and necessary and also measurable. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. One would be to reinstate neighborhood meetings of some sort, whether we call them CACs or something else. We can bring them down to the community center level and sort of make sure that those meetings are serving smaller groups of people and able to be responsive to timing, hybrid models, all sorts of things, so that we're actually meeting all people regardless of their schedules, their ability level, etc. We also need counselors who view it as incumbent upon them to get into the community. We need counselors who are at the zoning meetings themselves, and we need counselors who are looking to organizations where people have already placed their trust, like WakeUP, like WakeUp, and where when a community has already placed their trust, then we can go to the leaders of that organization and use them.
Underrepresentation of diversity has historically always been a problem in every large city, and as our city grows, we can't allow our diverse population to be forced in the corner. And information, as everyone else has brought up as well, is so huge that we need to be able to get the information to people and hear back from them. A lot of ways that we are communicating currently are not reaching enough people. We should reinstate community advocacy groups where people as a whole get together and are able to represent and voice to the council how they feel about issues. In addition, we need to reach out to the existing groups for all minority and groups where people may already be forming opinions, and make sure those opinions that are being grouped together are heard at the council level.
So one of the most important things about District B is it was actually just gerrymandering. We used to be 54% minority, it is now 46%. That's still a high number, but it did change. We need people who are going to be in those communities and have already been in those communities, working with groups like the NAACP, RWCA, and many others. Right now, we actually have 7 welcome homes that are in District B. In the next few months, there will actually be 12,000 renters who will be forced out of their apartments because of rent increases. There are programs from the federal government we need to be bringing forward for those groups of people. 75% of those groups of people are people of minority. Those are things that, as we're going into this election, that you need to know and have ready to make sure that your leaders know what they're doing and are ready for that representation.
Thank you. Moving on to the next question. Raleigh grew at about 20 people per day, over 70,000 over the last decade. With costs and a variety of other factors affecting larger cities, that number is expected to speed up over the next 10 years. What do you tell longtime residents that are concerned about their neighborhood character or changes on their street? And this time we'll start with Jacob and work our way down and bring 1 minute.
Okay. So if people are concerned at the level of their street,
what do you tell longtime residents that are concerned about their neighborhood character or changes on their street with all the growth and things like that?
We should always welcome in new people, regardless of diversity or lack of diversity moving in, which might be a greater topic. But at the same time, we need to do that by addressing the concerns of those people who have considerations about their current makeup. We need to get out and actually mingle and learn that we're all people together. And I think that is the strongest way to address that issue. We need more community center involvement, more parks, areas where people can get together and get down some of those barriers?
Yeah, I think, what do we tell people who notice that Raleigh is changing? The answer is yes, it is. It absolutely is. I think there is a lot of thought that it is one place or the other. It seems that is good or bad, that either our existing neighbors can thrive or our new neighbors can thrive. But I would tell my neighbors it's a both and scenario, that we need counselors at the table who will take a both and approach, that we can absolutely protect our neighbors who are watching their property values skyrocket and are worried that they're going to be displaced by those increases. And we can develop in smart ways so that we create room for our new neighbors. We can plan for putting critical infrastructure nearby where people live so they don't have to chain across the town. So that as our town grows, you don't have to drive 20 minutes to get to the nearest doctor or the nearest daycare center. It's a both and situation. We can look out for everyone right now, and we can build a world that works for them in the future.
So first off, I think it's great that Raleigh is growing at this rate. We're seeing so many people looking towards Raleigh, looking at the endless opportunities that we provide here in the city. But I think it's all about finding this nuanced balance between growth and development, and ensuring that we listen to our neighbors as well as listening to the future residents of Raleigh. And so I think the way we go about that is through predictability. We need to develop in a way that is predictable along major transit corridors and wherever appropriate, where density is appropriate. And so we need to work towards responsible development towards dense walkable neighborhoods along major transit corridors like Capitol Boulevard and wherever else is appropriate for density. So that's how we find this, we strike this nuanced balance.
As many of them have said, you want to make sure that you have the people that live here and the new people coming in are taken care of, but those numbers are actually a little fall short. The numbers that say that it's about 20 a day or a little bit more are actually fall short. They don't include NC State residents, they don't include Wake Tech residents, they don't include Shaw or St. Aug residents. NC State is projected to have 10,000 more students in the next 10 years. These are things that we have to bring to the table and know as we're building a better infrastructure for everyone, and as we're bringing everyone to the table, we need to know the numbers that are actually coming in so that we can actually build for the future. Those numbers fall a little bit short. We need to make sure that as we build, we actually know what's coming into Raleigh so that we can make a better future for everyone.
Thank you. I heard Capitol Boulevard mentioned, so I'm going to go to a transit question here. In the next couple of years, planning for bus rapid transit along Capitol Boulevard, going north, will get started. What do you want to see part of that project, and how we make sure your current constituents can benefit from it? Start with Megan and go back this way.
Yeah, so the proposed bus rapid transit, the north line of BRT, only will reach just the edge of this district. So in order to make sure that benefits my constituents in this district, I'd like to see a robust park and ride service at the edge of the BRT line. I really want to make sure that we plan to protect the people who do live along that corridor already, and protect the affordability of their housing. And then I think smart analysis of the TOD, as it's called, the Transit Overlay District, to make sure that we're putting things in that area that people will actually want to get to, like job opportunities, medical services, grocery, and childcare, etc. We want to make sure that we're putting things there that people actually want to get to, and that we're actually that we're also taking care of anybody who might be displaced, whose business might be displaced by development in that area.
So with bus rapid transit, I mean, it's going to help to alleviate much of the traffic that we see along Capitol Boulevard, as I'm sure anyone who's ridden on that street can attest to. So I think that bringing bus rapid transit to Capitol Boulevard is a great thing. But we come across this issue, like Megan outlined it briefly, about this last mile issue. It stops at Triangle Town Center, but you have to get to your house somehow. So I think it's about creating this connectivity, system of connectivity, connecting our greenways, ensuring that people have a way to walk, bike to that bus stop. I think that's essential, and that ties into moving towards walkable neighborhoods along Capitol Boulevard right there.
So we want to make sure that we bring forward and include the neighborhoods that we are going to be going through in BRT. It does stop short just of District B. But as we expand on BRT, we need to make sure we can create small bus hubs. There are 17 locations through like food line shopping centers and places where we can put a small hub where a bus visits and you can park and stay. And then you go to another hub to join BRT or anywhere else. There are 17 in our district that we can have a small hub where a small bus, it's not even a big one, we have small buses that can go and visit back and forth to those things like they do in Cary and Apex now. They have a small bus in Apex. And there's a shuttle that takes them to their big bus. Those are things that we can bring to this area to make sure that they're connecting with BRT and we're making sure we expand and include everyone in the neighborhoods.
Absolutely. High-speed transit is necessary and it's important and a positive thing, but where it stops is going to be always an issue. We're going to need essentially capillary networks, like Frank was saying, for buses, but we're also going to need the walkable neighborhoods. You're going to need some way to get to the bus. And if you've ever tried to walk along Capitol or across it, that's somewhat of a difficult task. And there's also talk about widening Capitol to increase its speed and amount of traffic it can move through. I would also recommend some things like I've seen in some larger areas, such as pedestrian overpasses. If you need to get to the other side of the street, it's expensive, but it solves the problem entirely in a safe way that guarantees pedestrian traffic can flow freely. I'd recommend all that in combination. We'll need some of each of it.
Thank you. Our next question combines transit, what we're just talking about, with climate change. Vehicle trips of 3 miles or less make up the largest amount of emissions in our city. Quite literally, it is quick runs to the store for milk or dropping off the kids at school or childcare that contribute the most to climate change. If elected, how will you propose we reduce carbon emissions to address this issue specifically?
So I think this all goes back to expanding our public transit options, moving towards BRT routes, moving towards rail lines. I think, and especially moving towards dense walkable neighborhoods, on major transit corridors. We need to do what we can to promote this shift away from being so car dependent and towards being more community centered. I would not want nothing more than to be able to walk 2 blocks down from my house to the nearest grocery store, to the nearest library, to the nearest school. And I'm sure that's the same sentiment across the district, across the city. So, what we need to do is increase our investments in public transit and work towards expanding that. And also, we need to promote the development of these dense walkable neighborhoods. We need to work towards connecting our greenways to ensure that people can ride on their bikes to wherever they please.
So District B, along with District C, has a lot of food deserts, and that makes it very difficult for people to say, oh, we're going to walk to the store and do this. So we need to make sure that we're making it so that there are not as many food deserts in District B, and you can have those walkable neighborhoods and things like that. You also have Oregon and Northern California right now working with Uber to make sure that there are actually small shuttle buses, and you can have them come into your neighborhood and you actually split the fare costs with the people that ride that shuttle bus. Those are things that we can look at bringing forward to our neighborhoods to use so that people can use those and not drive with cars, and they can travel to areas where they need to do. But we need to alleviate our food deserts in District B to help alleviate the problem.
The walkable neighborhoods alone aren't actually a solution to this because it is very spotty. I've seen walking or cycling through the city, you will have a bike lane for a little bit, and then you won't have one or walking. And this also includes shorter things like dropping children off at activities. Even if it's a short distance, if you have to walk along a shoulder of a 45-mile-per-hour road, you don't feel safe letting your child walk that distance. We need to correct that so that we have sidewalks and consistent access through that. But in addition, we need to provide easier access to the mass transit options that are available. We need to have more routes and smaller routes, such as shuttles or shorter routes between major shopping areas. It's absolutely required. And then we need ways to encourage people to use those greenways and bicycle systems that we build.
Awesome. So I think that in District B specifically, our opportunity to make impact on these small trips to the grocery store is to be asking, when new development comes to the table, asking those developers to think with walkability in mind. So you can look at a neighborhood like 5401 in District B, and it's a mix of housing types, but there's a bank and a child care center and a brewery and a doctor's office, and they're all right there, and there's a school. And so these things are possible. I think there is some friction between the idea that there's only density or there's only single family, but we can actually plan both with these things in mind. And so I think we can look to examples that are already in the district to bring the things that people need all into one spot. We can also make sure that things even like school buses are coming to where children need, so that they're being well accessed and well utilized. We can look to our partners across the county and to the school system.
Relating to the mentions about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, the City of Raleigh spends over $50 million annually on road-related construction, planning, and maintenance. How much do you think should be prioritized towards public transportation and bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure?
The dollar amount for that would be difficult to say. The problem that we have right now with our city councilors and our government is that we are not accessing all the federal funds that are out there. HUD has a program for that specifically. It has $1.9 billion sitting in it right now. They started the year with 2.8, it's now 1.9. Local governments and state governments are not using the money that is accessible to them to make sure that we can have those things. We can have those without increasing taxes, without spending our own money on those things. And that's something that when we go forward, we need to go get that money and bring it to our table so that we can spend the money, so we can have our bicycle lanes, we can have our walkability, we can have those things because there is federal grants that we can be accessing at our level.
Drawing an exact dollar amount would be basically impossible without actually looking at the cost of individual projects and what needs to happen. I can agree with that, but we do need to draw on more money, and as we continue to grow, it'll be very hard to add these factors later. So wherever we draw the money from to add a sustainable bicycle lane system, we need to do it now while we're widening and building, because adding it afterwards will easily triple the cost by most figures to rip up existing infrastructure and to replant it after. So I would find it absolutely necessary to try to find those funds and to start planning with that in mind as we connect new developments and old developments, and as roads get improved, to add the sidewalks where there isn't one, or add the bike lane where there isn't one.
There, yeah, so I agree. Planning for complete streets is essential for all new street projects. I think that we need to have equitable distribution across the districts for the types of movement and mobility that are appropriate for those districts. So there's a lot of reason to put a lot of dollars downtown on things like bike and pedestrian modalities. Out here in District B, we need to make sure that we are also investing in cars. It's going to be a while before BRT makes it out to us, so we need to make sure that we're investing in the ability to move our cars around. But we also need to link that to sustainability too. So we can invest in protecting the tree canopies so that our streets are cool and asphalt's not warming our climate. So we make a lot of investments in medians, street canopy, and other things like that also protect our climate while we're working toward a less car-dependent environment.
Yeah, so I'm going to start off by saying I don't think there's a specific dollar amount to this question, but I will say that we can't simply build ourselves out of traffic. We can't build ourselves out of infrastructure issues. What we have to do is move towards away from being so car dependent and expand our funding in public transit opportunities, so that we can move away from being car dependent and move towards a sustainable way of traveling throughout our city.
Going back to the growth that we mentioned earlier, ranch-style homes are being torn down and replaced with huge single-family homes priced at 4 to 5 times the original house. Given the city and voters' emphasis on density, which we've mentioned, and affordable housing, what could or should be done, if anything, by the city to change what is happening?
We need to include in new development a mixed size required. So I would include a mixed density for all new development that's going in. So if you are putting in these large homes in some section, you're going to have to put in a section of row houses as well. They don't have to be next to each other. Everyone can be happy with that. As far as property values go, we need to include affordable options in new development that's going in, and also preserve some of those older districts. As this process moves forward, we're gonna force everybody who does not make a substantial income out of our city. All of the workers and valuable infrastructure employees for the city won't actually be able to afford to live here if this continues.
Yeah, so protecting naturally occurring affordable housing is really important. It can be done in a few ways. There are ways we can partner with our friends at the county to implement tax refund and tax relief for people whose property taxes are rising, and that's part of their displacement. Making sure that people can continue to afford their homes allows them to stay in them, and can break some of the cycle of tearing them down and building much more expensive homes. We also, there has been a missing middle text change. I think bringing a lot of attention to that and modifying components of it that have been tough for our community to swallow can help make sure that we're building a variety of home types that are accessible to people across the income spectrum. We need to continue to build designated affordable housing for folks who are living at 50 or 30% of the area median income. So there's a lot of strategies, and we need to use them all at once so that we can keep housing all the people who want to live there.
Yeah, so it's upsetting that this is happening. Tearing down these houses, it takes away from the character of our city, and so it truly is an issue. So I would look into a possible text change that would examine putting certain restrictions or so a text change that would just look to prevent the tearing down and building of McMansions that are that go for millions and millions of dollars. But on top of that, I think it's also important to sort of redefine this concept of home ownership. What does home ownership really mean today? And that's all about owning your single-family detached house. I think we need to work towards redefining that so that you can own your condo, you can own your townhouse. It's okay. That's what we want, and that ties into missing middle housing, and that would promote affordability throughout our city.
So most of, you're talking about houses being torn down or mansions being, like, right?
Basically.
So if it's a regular person buying a house and that's what they want to do with their house, then that's perfectly fine. But 70% of the houses that this is happening to are actually Wall Street bankers in New York. Mm-hmm. And that can be stopped in a heartbeat. You can make sure that the house cannot be sold to a Wall Street banker or someone who is out of state. That can happen. It has to be a single person and not a group entity. Those are the people that are buying our properties, tearing them down, and building those houses. So those are the things that when we're going forward, those are the things that you're looking at, is stopping that from happening, to make sure that we're protecting and we can have those affordable housing and things like that. But we have to put a change to make sure that it's not the groups that are buying it. If it's an individual, that's their choice. If they have a family and they want to build that, But we gotta stop the groups that are coming down from New York, buying those and changing those properties.
Okay, since we've been giving our friends up here questions for about 30 minutes, I'm going to provide a little bit of a transition here. If you would like a card to submit a question, Gail has the cards and the pen, so perhaps you can just raise your hand and she can bring them to you. And I've got a question I'm going to give them, and so you can hear that. You all can go to the bathroom or a sip of water, and then we'll continue. That also gives us the opportunity to check and see if there's anything from Twitter we want to pull from. Okay. All right, so this next question, you may have heard that there was a study committee regarding council terms, pay, and so on and so forth. How do you feel about the recommendations of the study committee regarding 4-year staggered terms? And I think we're negative, yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think it was right for a study to be conducted to modernize the council. I think 4-year staggered terms makes a lot of sense in terms of continuity of governance. Not turning over the council every single 2 years helps a lot more things get done. I also know that it was not universally well liked by our constituents, and so I think before we would make any changes to council terms, we need to make sure that there's broad sweeping community engagement, and that not only there is understanding of why that might be useful, but that there's agreement that this is the right direction for our council to move in. So community engagement is absolutely necessary before we make a legislative change like that one.
Yeah, so I'm overall supportive of this concept of staggered 4-year terms for council. I think it would bring a lot of stability, and I think you can see that in numerous scholarly reports that have been written by experts in this field. But also, I think a common example to look back to is the United States House of Representatives. I mean, we don't have a staggered term for the House of Representatives, and you see how unstable it is. It goes back from Republicans to Democrats, and people, whoever's in power will just, reverse everything that the previous party did. So I think moving towards 4-year staggered terms is beneficial, and it would surely promote stability within our council and within our city.
So I believe that we do need 4-year terms, and it's, you have everything that Manu said and Megan said, all of that, but it has to go even further. One of the hardest things to do is actually run for public office. The amount of time that you have to commit to a campaign, there is no way that any counselor can actually run for a campaign office and do all the work that they have to do. It's just not physically possible. There's not enough hours in the day to do it. Between the meetings and everything else, if you want to be able to actually have community engagement and things like that, you need to have those longer term, staggered terms, so that you can actually give service to your community once you are elected. But if you're having to run for office every year, because once you're elected, if your case is 2 years later, you're running for office for a year. So you're in office for a year, then you're running for a year. And during that entire year, you're working to get elected again, not necessarily doing all the work you need to be doing for the community.
I agree with 4-year staggered terms. The overlap would build a certain amount of stability, and I can see a lot of logic behind that. In addition, I have to say that the duration of a 2-year term does make it difficult to accomplish anything, to build a valuable base of knowledge and information and communication with the community, and then be able to act on it in that same period of time. It is way too short. I think 4 years makes sense, and to stagger it would still allow for the same basic flow of elections that we have currently. It seems logical, but once again, overall, the community and the voter base has to be in agreement with whatever changes made.
Thank you. So at this time, I think we could take like a 2-minute break, if that is feasible, so that Gail and I can collect the cards. I can look at them and group them as appropriate. So if you 4 up here need to run and use the bathroom, go out and get a breath of fresh air, get some water, come back in 2 minutes, and we can.
We're going to take a 2-minute.
So 6:08.
You look familiar. Is your website? Like all the great to see with yes, we invite all of them to submit. It's unedited, but whatever they give us. Everything will be on your ballot. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Hi. How are you, Nathan?
Good to see you. Hey. Sorry, I got the live feed going. We had some technical difficulties with our MeFo camera, so we're doing it mobile.
So the old-fashioned way. Technology is great until it's not.
Exactly. Good to see you.
Where's your associate director? See,
He's at Dick's Park now.
he left you guys already? You guys like the training ground?
They pay better.
All right, I think we'll get started again. 10 here, or a little after 6:08. And looking at these cards, we have quite a variety, so I'm just going to shuffle them up here and then draw them at random. So do it that way. And then in the middle, you can come ask your question. The majority of this job is understanding zoning. What is your experience of that? Here we go.
So I don't have extensive experience in urban planning or zoning requests and whatnot. I will say I took the most I've gotten is taking an urban planning class last year with Dan Howe. He used to be the assistant city manager for the city of Raleigh, and throughout that whole class, I learned so much about urban planning concepts such as new urbanism, this whole concept of walkable neighborhoods, smart growth, green design. So this is exactly what I want to see coming to Raleigh. And learning about these, it sort of struck a chord in me. It opened my eyes and made me realize this is what Raleigh needs in order to prosper, in order to grow in a way that is right for everyone.
So that question stops a little bit short. I know a lot about zoning. I've been working on it for years. I ran for county commission. These are things that I understand and know well. But it stops short because it also deals with you need the people who know how to write grants, people who know how to write policy. You can't change zonings unless you write policy for it. You can't have grants and money coming to us unless you know how to write grants and have grant writers who properly know how to write grants. Grant writing takes hundreds of hours just to get $1 million. It'll take you about 200 hours of grant writing just to get that $1 million from the federal government. Those are things that we have to know as we're going into city council to make sure that if we're actually going to have an equitable place and all of these things that we want great for Raleigh, you have to know those things as you're going into the job.
Yeah. My personal experience with zoning is not extensive. I've been studying the city council's request for zoning to try and get a better understanding of what's going on currently. As a child, I played a lot of SimCity, but in addition, I've also been paying a lot of attention to what I've seen in other cities across the country and how they've balanced green space to parks to neighborhood, and I've seen a lot of interesting ideas that come out of that, and I would like to add a lot of those ideas into it. I'd like to see medians planted with native plants that would help with pollinators and environmental issues. They also require less maintenance than grass does. There are a lot of considerations you can go along how you zone this and how you plant it to really improve and preserve the character of the city.
I too do not have a degree in urban planning. Nobody amongst us does. I think what we need from our counselors is not necessarily expertise in every single thing that could come across the council table. There's no way we could accomplish that, but rather an ability to be self-studied, hardworking, to collaborate with experts in their field, and that's a thing that I promise to do. I think we've been really benefited by the internet, if you will. There's a lot of information out there, not only about what's happening in our city, but what's happening across all cities, and there's a lot of research and historical information to be learned about how zoning has impacted, or like how it has perpetuated and systematized racism in our cities. We need counselors who are willing to stay studied and keep working to understand those things.
Next question from the crowd. If elected, would you support an alternative mental health crisis unit separate from Raleigh Police Department? I think we're back to right.
I would support that. That is actually one of the budget items that I have already prepared for when I am elected, is to bring that forward. We are actually short-staffed. Right now, it says 150 officers short, but that's based on 2018 residents. We are actually about, based on our residency, 275 officers short. And then to bring on top of that, we need to add an alternative unit so that they can go out and help in mental health cases, because there are people that when you show up with a gun and badge, you scare them. Not because of what you've done or anything, it's just the stability that they are. Those are things that we need to make sure that we're working with our police departments to have, so that we can have our units go out and work together and make a difference for our communities.
I absolutely support the additional community involvement in policing. We also need additional training for our police officers in mental health cases in general. There are a program called CIT. I personally, with my family, work with CIT officers, and they're very helpful. This is an excellent program. We can include this and the percentage and involve incentives for officers to get this training to help collaborate with a separate mental health unit. Public safety is a responsibility of everybody in our communities, and everybody benefits. We need responsible policing from individuals who are, carefully trained and fit.
I absolutely support developing co-responder models that put mental health crises and other types of crisis response into the hands of people who are specially trained to handle those situations. I don't believe that every police officer is equipped to handle every mental health crisis, nor do they need to. Before I commit fully to saying, yes, how's this program outside of the police budget, I would like to see more analysis of programs that have been successful, both from using more of their police budget to house those co-responder units versus units that have been housed outside of the police budget. So I'm committed to getting money and effort to co-responding. I am not ready to commit fully, yes, within the police budget or no, outside of it.
I would just echo that as well. I don't necessarily feel comfortable fully committing to it, but I think it's a great opportunity to look into and examine. I think one of the first things that we have to consider is that, pertaining to the Raleigh Police Department, their use of force, their first step, their use of force continuum, their first step is their presence. And so that should not, there's no doubt that when a police officer attends a mental health crisis call, people are going to be spooked. So what we have to do is make sure that we, find other options like this, what was just posed, and examine that and seeing the viability of it and the success rate in other areas. And so, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it also ties into improving the training that our police officers have here in the city to ensure that our police department is the best in the nation.
District B. District B, we're not making up districts here tonight, sorry about that. District B is home to many immigrants. How would you make the services and programs mentioned accessible to people who may be undocumented or whose first language may not be English? There we go, thank you. Keep it in your toes.
Could you repeat that?
Sure. How would you make the services and programs mentioned accessible to people who may be undocumented or whose language may not be English?
We need to look at the languages spoken within our communities and try to improve outreach groups. If we have a mental health group, they need to speak the languages of the people who may be having a mental health crisis. This is that you can't just get people to instantly learn a language overnight. I understand that, but we need to provide incentives so that we have a ratio of bilingual people in these positions at least. And then, in addition, we need to make sure that, as was mentioned, that there is a feeling of fear or persecution when you're being delivered a mental health service. When someone is trying to help you, you shouldn't have to fear of them, taking away that jail or other forms of persecution would be a result of calling for help.
Awesome. So I am going to take a broader interpretation of services and say that we, all of the city services should be offered in at least Spanish and English. We should look to operate translation services for council meetings, committee meetings, agendas, meeting minutes, all of those things. It's literally the least we can do. But also looking to, again, organizations or communities have already placed their trust. We know that communities all over our city have either formalized or informal networks of people that they trust who can communicate with them and give them the information that they need. And so it's incumbent on our counselors to to find and invest in the organizations where communities have already placed their trust and get out into them. Find the leaders of communities, both formal and informal, and meet with them and make sure that they're sharing the news, the information, the changes that are coming to our city.
So in terms of access to our city services, I believe that, I agree with what Megan said. We need to expand the languages that we have available. At least Spanish, at least, having a translation option on the website, city government website, which I believe we do, and having this sort of translation service available at community meetings, like we do today, if I'm not mistaken. But although this isn't city oriented, but having these sorts of outlets available, I think is crucial to involving our foreign speakers, undocumented immigrants in these processes.
As of right now, based on numbers, we actually have 47 different languages that are spoken in District B. We need to make sure I work with people in our community. Right now, I'm helping bring in 10 refugee families a week with WakeUP Ministries. They go all across the country, but some do stay here. We need to make sure that we're working with these groups and services, and we bring everyone to the table. We make sure that they have a voice at the table. We're listening to them. We're talking to them, and we have to make sure that they understand that, one, we're not going to turn them in for being illegal immigrants or anything like that. That we're here for them, and we need to make sure that we know all the languages that are coming in. I'm not going to be able to speak 47, but we know which languages they are and who we can get in contact with so that we can communicate that with that person on their level and make sure that they understand how we feel about them and that we care about them.
Would you like to move on? Thank you. I believe the question was posed to Mr. Pierce. And is that better? Yeah. Okay. There was a question that was posed, of course, as we're discussing affordable housing. And as a real estate agent, that's something that I struggle with on a day-to-day basis because my base, are clients of affordable housing. And so I noticed, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you stated that.
Just one caveat here, the questions have to go to the district, not one candidate.
I apologize. I believe the question was referenced to stop the investors from purchasing the home. Well, what I've noticed as a real estate agent is that they're starting to use their representatives on the front end to go ahead and sign it. So once you receive the contract that was submitted, it appears as though that this is an individual person that's purchasing your home. And then months down the road, you realize it's an investor. Or with the investor, they're putting down $40,000 or $50,000 over the asking price, which your average hourly individual can't compete with. So how do we deal with that situation? How do we, negotiate that? How do we handle that moving forward and try to put the brakes on that, so to speak? Is there a way? Thank you.
Yeah, a really great question. The city cannot do all of that on its own. We do need strong partners at the state. There are a lot of methods. There's one state legislator who's working on a bill to limit due diligence payments to 1%, so that an actual regular person has a chance of receiving a bid on the home. So we need help from our friends at the state. We need strong legislators there too. There's also there are ways they can put forward legislation to prevent sort of these investment firms and investment companies. So yeah, for this one, I would say we need to look to our partners in the state and make sure that our counselors are building bridges with our representatives of the state to make sure that they're doing that and make sure that's a thing to understand that's important to our city and our residents.
Yeah, so I think the important thing to note is that North Carolina is a bill-and-rule state, which means that a lot of times, this is up to the state legislature to sort of pass bills and give that power to the municipalities so that we're able to, implement rules and regulations that concern land use policies and whatnot. Like Megan said, it does go back to the state legislature, and we need to work with them, partner with them to ensure that, we work towards preventing investors coming into the city and buying up our properties and, selling them for outrageous prices. But in addition to that, maybe something that I would want to examine is the sort of residency, not necessarily requirement, but for lack of a better word, requirement, where people have to reside in the house that they own in the city.
So the first thing we have to do is we can actually put a stay on the selling of homes, period, and they can all be reviewed. Now there is a stay statewide that we can put on sale of our homes and Raleigh that we can put on to overview. Now, most likely the state will lose in court. That is something that would happen. Realtors could sue you and take all that, correct. And as they point out, working with state legislators to get things done, but it's who's already been there working. Over the last year and a half, I have had 175 dinners or lunches with Republicans and Democrats all across the state, from Senator Bill Berger to all the Wake County delegation, to bring forward stuff to make sure that if they brought something forward from Wake County, or Raleigh, they had support from Republicans or Democrats across this state. And working with those people, most of our councilors don't go down to Raleigh to talk to the NCGA. All right, and right now they're out of session. But so you know, every day there's about 27 legislators down there, all from the Republican Party, that you can go talk to or not talk to, but you can get things done for the city.
Yeah, I think we need to look at how we can monitor that. I'm not sure exactly what the policy would be required in order to determine that the individual is not a representative of the company. That's a valid question. I would have to go back and do some homework on what would be involved in limiting that particular process. Definitely the larger organizations, the national conglomerates that are coming in and purchasing houses, we need to limit the amount that they can purchase, or if they can. In addition, rental companies are another concern. This is actually happening on my own street. That as each house goes up for sale, it goes for a lot of money and it gets purchased by a rental company. We need to limit it, not entirely maybe, but what percentage of a neighborhood can be rental properties or could be used for short-term rentals. That's a growing concern as well, as that's happening in other cities. We need to look at how much of the stock is being purchased by who and how much can be. Maybe not 100% stock, but definitely look at what is a healthy percentage can be traded.
Studies indicate that self-selecting community engagement processes. I'm sorry, I'm having. I'm not sure. CACs tend to favor older, wealthier, white homeowners. How would you address engagement to achieve more diverse voices being heard? I apologize. I'll read it again a little more clearly. So, studies indicate that self-selecting community engagement processes like CACs tend to favor older, wealthier, white homeowners. How would you address engagement to achieve more diverse voices being heard?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no denying that CACs, as they stood before, benefited those with, the time, money, and inclination to attend these CAC meetings. So obviously, what we have to do is improve our community engagement plan. I think opening up a community engagement group in the city of Raleigh government, I think that was a step forward. But we have to do better. I think it goes back to what I said previously about possibly having people go out into neighborhoods where there's a rezoning case and knock on those doors and inform everybody, hey, this is happening in your neighborhood, this is how it's going to impact you. We're going to have a community meeting next week. come along if you have the time. If not, here are other ways that you can participate. And in addition to that, it's about also educating our younger generation. I think we need to go out into those schools and just outline the importance of city government, outline the importance of engaging in local politics.
So one of the first things that we need to do is they need to have more meetings. There are people that work 2 jobs and can't come at night. There are people who just work at night and can't come at night. Having meetings offered during the workday, having meetings offered at night, and also meetings that each community can come to. When you go out into, I live in precinct 1302, you can reach out to people who live in 1302 and figure out what is the best time for most people in that neighborhood to meet. And you can have meetings by precincts, by neighborhoods, and say, hey, how can we get 70% of you guys to show up to our meeting? What day of the week works for you and what time? Those are things that we can do with outreach and community involvement and making sure that it's not just us and it's not just a set time, hey, it's 11 a.m. and it's 7 p.m. It's, hey, let's go to these communities, let's ask what works for them, and then we can change our schedule to do that.
Yeah, we definitely need to separate it into separate groups and canvass opinions. But there's also an issue where many people who should be attending this because they're impacted by the decisions are not. They do not feel empowered. They do not feel like that their decision or their opinion would be taken or considered. And we need to make sure that we have a voice for them in those community meetings. So people who already feel that they are important, of course, get out there and make themselves heard. So we need a way to try and draw those opinions out, and also make sure that those meetings are meaningful. They short and to the point. People who work 2 jobs don't necessarily want to sit there for 2 hours. If only 15 minutes of it was something that they had a lot to say about. We need to make sure that this is an easily approachable format for the average person to interact with.
Yeah, I agree that that the old model of CACs did amplify voices of people who could make it out at certain times, and it was not representing whole communities. As I mentioned before, bringing it down to a smaller group, having each community center represent a smaller map will mean that everyone is closer to the community they're meant to be representing. So I think that's one place to start. I also think that measurement is really essential. So I think making sure that each CAC or what if we call it something else, that's fine too. But and each neighborhood group has similar governance strategies, has the same rules and regs of sorts, but then also that we're evaluating who's there, who's showing up, who's tuning in online for a hybrid session, who's catching up on social media later. We need to understand who's being accessed, and if we find that in a group where a certain neighborhood group is not meeting all their constituents' needs, then that's when the city will need to intervene. That's when councilors of that district need to get in there and intervene.
This is a yes or no question. Have you read the 2016 Wake Transit Plan as approved by voters?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
We have 2 left. Let's see. The job of voters is to hold elected officials accountable. Name one specific policy, program, or thing you want the people of Raleigh to hold you accountable for at the end of your term.
Just one?
That's what it said.
I hope you'll hold me accountable for a lot of things. One is affordable housing. One is increasing pay for our firefighters, our police officers, better training, bringing those forward, making sure we have equitability all across this Raleigh, making sure that we are planning for the future. Our infrastructure is increasing. Most of everyone watching this or in this room does not know we actually will not have anywhere to put trash in 12 years. We don't know by the year 2040 we will have a water crisis the same as California predicted. Environmentalists predict that based on our growth and things like that. So these are things that are coming along in the future that we have to start planning for now. And if we don't start planning now, then we're going to fail for the future. So I want you to hold me accountable not for one thing, but for all of that. Because if we don't, then Raleigh will fail. And I do not want that to happen.
say maybe one thing, it does make it very difficult to think that the single most important thing. I do think increasing base pay not for firefighters and most of our civil servants across the board would increase our staffing levels. And also making those positions more competitive would increase the overall quality of the services provided. But that's not all. I'd also like to see, a better environmental policy and better walkability and maintainability, in general feeling of safety and security as people move about the city.
I'm coming to this race to, I was motivated to step up because I want to make a better life for my daughter, but I also want to make a better life for the people who live in my neighborhoods right now. And so the thing I would want to be held accountable for at the end of my term is that true? Is that true in ways of housing access? Is that true in ways of sustainability? Is that true in methods of citizen engagement? I'm promising to bring you to the table, and at the end of 2 years, did I bring you to the table? Let me know. I want to make sure that I did. But that's where I'd like to be held accountable.
So, yeah, I'd like to be held accountable for, much of what I say. If I don't at least attempt to do many of the things that I want to do for the city of Raleigh, then hold me accountable. Say that I didn't do it. Say that I didn't try. And another thing that I want to outline is, I want to make myself as accessible to District B as much as possible. I want you guys to reach out and contact me whenever you guys have questions, concerns, comments. And if I don't do that, call me out on that. And I think that's where accountability also lies.
Okay, this question relates back to what was discussed earlier with purchasing, and then we will move into closing statements for 1 minute and so what legal concept gives Raleigh City Council the authority to dictate who could buy a property? And Jacob, you get to go first.
Well, so I don't think it's entirely just up to the council. The way that question is phrased, it makes it sound like we were deciding individually on whether a person can purchase or not. I don't think that's really the case. It's what type of purchase can be made in an area, whether you're going to try to.
Well, you said that.
Try to knock something down or to build something new. Those are different types of development. But I think ultimately it's about broad strokes from the city council level on purchasing. That we decide to implement policy that will restrict or not restrict based on a perceived or documented issue.
I do not believe the city has any legal authority to restrict who can buy private property. Indeed, that's part of why we're facing the housing crisis that we have. When a private property goes up for sale and an equity firm can pay double or triple the amount for that home, then they can buy it. And the individual property owner and definitely the city government has limited ability to restrict the sale of that property.
Yeah, so it just goes back to us being adults. I don't think we have that. I'm no lawyer myself. I don't think we have that authority to restrict anybody's right to purchase any sort of property here in the city of Raleigh. But it is a problem having these investors and corporations coming to the city, buying up our land and selling it for double, triple, quadruple the price. So we have to close these loopholes, but it's just a matter of what can we do, and that's worth examining.
And the way that starts is it actually starts at our state level, but it starts that most people actually do not know you can actually write textual changes at the state level for local municipalities, local counties, and everything. So we can work with our Wake delegation, Senator Dan Blue, Julie Von Hafen, Senator Batch, and get them to bring forward textual changes to just Wake County, or just Raleigh, or just Cary. You can bring that forward, and that can be voted at a General Assembly level. You can write policy for local levels. You just have to get them to bring it forward, and working with them to get that done is something that we can do, because at least conversations I've had with them, they're on the same page because they're having the same issues because they represent the same counties.
put the closing statements up, so 1 minute and starting with Megan.
First, thank you all for coming. Thank you for spending your time here with us. Saturday night, you could be anywhere. It's raining. You could be home, cozy. So I'm glad that you're here, and thanks to all the groups that set this up. You're doing incredible work in our community, so thank you for that. I hope that you will vote for me in November because I think I'm the right person for the job. I have spent years working hard, grinding, hustling, spending hours to improve the lives of the people that I love. That's been my family, it's been my neighborhood, it's been my employees, and my school, and now I'm ready to turn my focus to the people that I continue to love, which are my neighbors here in District B. I think I've got what you need.
Yeah, so again, thank you all for coming out here and attending this forum and asking some questions and hearing our responses. I want to say that, throughout this evening, we talked about several issues ranging from housing, transit, our environment, and I strongly believe that I'm the right candidate to get these policies across, mitigate these issues and propose solutions that actually make a difference. I also believe that, looking at my experience, my helping my community, being out there, my traits, my skills, I think it all comes together and shows that, I truly care about this community. I truly care about Raleigh. And I want to do what's best for Raleigh. And so I hope you'll vote for me come November. Manu Lee for Raleigh City Council District B. Thank you.
We have some amazing candidates up here. All of them bring a lot of stuff to the table. The difference between me and everyone else is no one that you will ever meet works harder than me. I think this job is going to require 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the next 4 years at least. The way Raleigh's going, if we're not spending that much time writing policy, bringing grants forward, bringing things forward for our community, then it's not going to change. People are being forced out of the rental properties, people are being forced out of their homes. You have to take the time to spend time with those people. I am in those communities. I deliver food. I go out and raise money for backpack drives. I do all these things in the community. I've been doing it for years, and I plan to keep doing it. But I want to make sure that I'm doing it for everybody in District B, and giving them the 18 hours that I give everyone else right now is going to be just for District B. Because that's what we need to make sure that Raleigh can progress forward and have the diligence that it needs and things to be done. And I would love to have your vote in November for Frank Pierce District B.
I would also like to thank everyone for showing up. I'd like to thank all the other candidates also for their valuable insight and intelligent perspective. I would just like to say that I'm really inspired by all the issues that have been brought forward and the questions, and I'm very excited to start work on addressing those issues. And I think I can bring forward some perspective, and I'll continue to research each issue, even if I hadn't heard of it before when someone presents it to me. And I would like to, turn that corner, and each time I'm presented on an issue, have a fresh look at it, and taking all the insight from the people have given me. And I hope you'll vote for me in November. Jacob Lord Black for District B. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This forum has been recorded and can be found on WakeUp's Facebook page and WRL.com. We'd like to thank you all in the audience for attending, again, as the candidates have said, coming out on a Saturday evening here, and Greenwood Community Center for hosting the space, and all the partners for coming together to make this happen. Thank you again to the candidates who are here tonight for putting yourself forward to serve the citizens of Raleigh and running for District B. Just some closing reminders. Do be sure to check your voter registration to ensure that it is accurate and up to date. Early voting, again, runs from October 20th to November 5th, with Election Day being on November 8th. Information about hours and other election details can be found with our friends from El Pueblo at the table with the red tablecloth over here to your left. And then you can contact candidates after the forum and through individual information that can also be found at vote411.org. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you as the forums continue over the next few